Chapter 1: The Missing Book and the Bookstore Detective. In the quiet corner of a foggy city stood a forgotten bookstore named The Forgotten Page. Its glass windows were dusted with age, and its antique wooden sign bore faded letters, as if painted decades ago. Where stories rest and mysteries awaken. Samuel Blake, the store's owner and a hidden detective, was seated at his desk, poring over a worn, leather-bound journal. Samuel's unique skill lay in decoding the traces hidden within books, the folded corners, ink stains, and scraps of paper pressed between pages. For him, they weren't mere signs of wear and tear, they were the keys to buried secrets. "Someone's been writing in this journal again," Samuel muttered, lifting his magnifying glass. On the last page of the journal, faint scratches were etched into the paper. When held to the light, they revealed a cryptic message. 26B, lights out. As Samuel puzzled over the note, the shop's bell rang softly. At the door stood a young woman. Dressed in a tailored suit and carrying a large brown envelope, she walked briskly to the counter, her heels clicking against the wooden floor. She glanced at Samuel before speaking in a calm but anxious tone. "You're Samuel Blake, the bookstore detective, correct?" Samuel leaned back in his chair, a slight smirk crossing his face. "Detective. That's not a title I advertise, but it fits on occasion. What brings you here?" She placed the envelope on the counter and pulled out a thin, aged book. The cover bore the faded title, The Missing Dawn. "This book belonged to my father," she said, her voice quivering slightly. "After reading it, he vanished." Samuel took the book, running his fingers over its worn cover. It was clearly old, but more than that, it was strange. Several pages had been carefully torn out. Ripped pages. Was anything left behind? Samuel asked. The woman shook her head. "Before he disappeared, my father told me he had found the truth on the other side of the page. I don't know what he meant by that." Samuel frowned, flipping the book open. Between two of the remaining pages, something was lodged, a photograph. He pulled it out to examine it. The photograph showed a foggy landscape with a shadowy forest in the distance. At its center, barely visible through the mist, was the door to a building marked 26B. Coincidence? "I don't think so." Samuel's gaze returned to the journal entry, 26B, lights out. "This isn't just a missing person case. This book is hiding something much larger," he muttered. Samuel turned back to the woman. "Miss, I'll take your case. But this could get dangerous, so I'll need your trust and patience." Her eyes betrayed a flicker of hesitation, but she nodded firmly. "Please, find my father." That night, Samuel locked up his shop and ventured out into the misty streets. The book and photograph were tucked securely in his pocket, along with the cryptic clues that tied everything together. His destination was clear, 26B. Whatever awaited him there, it was certain to hold the answers hidden in the missing dawn. Chapter 2: The Door in the Darkness. The fog blanketed the streets in a heavy shroud, muting even the faint glow of the streetlights. Samuel made his way through the labyrinth of alleyways, clutching the photograph of the mysterious building marked 26B. It wasn't long before he found it, a decrepit apartment building that looked as if it hadn't seen maintenance in decades. Rusted iron stairs spiraled upward like a forgotten relic, and a faded 26B barely clung to the paint-chipped door. "This must be it," Samuel murmured as he approached. Carefully, he reached for the doorknob. To his surprise, it turned without resistance, creaking loudly as the door opened. The sound echoed into the silent darkness within. Inside the building, the air was damp and cold, carrying the scent of rotting wood. Dust clung to the narrow hallway, and peeling wallpaper drooped from the walls like old curtains. Samuel switched on his flashlight, its beam cutting through the gloom. At the far end of the corridor, a smaller door stood out, oddly clean compared to its surroundings. Scrawled on its surface, in faded handwriting, were the words, "Where the dawn disappears." Samuel's brow furrowed. The phrase was eerily similar to the title of the book he had been given, The Missing Dawn. He approached the door cautiously, scanning its surface for details. The keyhole glinted in the beam of his flashlight, but something was jammed inside, a small piece of paper. He carefully extracted the scrap and examined it under the light. Written in spindly handwriting was another cryptic message. "Trust the light, or be lost forever." The light. Samuel muttered. What light are they talking about? He shone his flashlight over the door again, this time focusing on its surface. As the light moved across it, faint symbols began to appear, glowing dimly like fading embers. They formed a circular pattern resembling a clock, but instead of numbers, the positions were marked with strange glyphs. The riddle deepens. Samuel turned off the flashlight and stepped back, thinking. The fragments of the puzzle were slowly coming together. The ripped page in the book. The photograph showing 26B. The repeated references to light. It hit him, light might not refer to the flashlight at all, but to something more natural, something tied to the phrase "where the dawn disappears." The eastern window. Samuel realized. He moved to the far side of the apartment where a grimy window overlooked the street. Through the fog, faintly visible, was another building, a shadowy, old church. A church. Samuel whispered to himself. That must be the next clue. Footsteps in the hallway. Before Samuel could leave, he heard something, a faint sound, like footsteps echoing through the corridor. He froze, his hand instinctively reaching for the pocket where he kept a small utility knife. "Who's there?" he called out. The footsteps grew louder, then stopped. Silence enveloped the building once again, but Samuel remained alert, scanning the shadows. Suddenly, a voice broke the stillness. "What are you doing here?" Samuel turned, aiming his flashlight at the source of the voice. To his surprise, standing in the dim light was the same woman who had brought him the book. "You?" Samuel's voice was sharp with disbelief. "What are you doing here? I warned you it could be dangerous." The woman hesitated, her expression a mix of fear and determination. I had to come. I couldn't just sit and wait. This place, it felt like it was calling me. Samuel frowned but didn't argue. If you're here, then you're staying close and following my lead. No questions. She nodded, clutching her coat tightly. Samuel glanced back at the glowing symbols on the door one last time, then motioned toward the exit. We're done here. Our next stop is that church. Whatever's going on, the answers are waiting for us there. Toward the church. The two of them slipped out of the building and into the fog-drenched streets. The woman stayed close behind Samuel, her footsteps soft and nervous. Why would my father go to a church? She asked. He never mentioned anything about religion. It might not have anything to do with faith, Samuel replied. A place like that could be a perfect hiding spot, or a trap. As they approached the dark silhouette of the church, its Gothic spires seemed to claw at the sky. The building stood eerily still, its stained glass windows shattered in places, leaving jagged holes that gaped like empty eyes. Samuel shone his flashlight across the doors, noticing fresh scratches near the lock. Someone had been here recently. Looks like we're not the only ones chasing this mystery, Samuel muttered. He reached for the handle and gave it a cautious push. The door creaked open, revealing the dark interior of the church. Inside the church. The air inside was colder than the streets, carrying the weight of something ancient and unseen. The ruined pews stretched toward a crumbling altar, where a strange light glowed faintly. As Samuel moved closer, he saw what was causing it. Resting atop the altar was a weathered book, its cover etched with intricate designs that seemed to shimmer faintly under his flashlight's beam. That's not normal, Samuel said, motioning for the woman to stay back. She ignored him and took a step forward, drawn to the book. Samuel quickly caught her arm. Wait. That could be a trap. He knelt beside the altar and examined the book more closely. Beneath it, hidden among the dust and debris, was a device that resembled an old clock. Its hands were frozen at 12 o'clock, and an inscription was carved into its base. The truth is hidden when the clock strikes 12. Samuel's eyes narrowed. This isn't just a clue. It's part of something bigger. As he stood, a new sound filled the air, the unmistakable thud of footsteps coming from the shadows. A mysterious stranger. A tall figure emerged from the darkness, clad in a long black coat. His voice was deep and calm as he spoke. Don't touch that book. If you do, you won't escape the consequences. Samuel aimed his flashlight at the man. And who exactly are you? The man didn't flinch under the light. Instead, he smirked faintly and replied, someone who knows the price of the truth you're chasing. Samuel didn't lower his light, his mind racing. The book on the altar, the clock, and now this stranger, everything seemed connected. But how? And why? One thing was clear, whatever lay ahead, it would only lead them deeper into the mystery. Chapter 3: Secrets of the Church. The mysterious man's words echoed in the cold, empty church. If you open that book, there's no going back. What you're chasing isn't just the truth. Samuel tightened his grip on his flashlight but didn't take his eyes off the stranger. If you know so much about this book, why don't you enlighten us? What's the real story here? And how does this tie to her father's disappearance? The man's smirk faded, replaced by a somber expression. It's all connected. This book isn't just a record. It's a gate. The gate. A gate? The woman exclaimed, her voice tinged with disbelief. The man gestured toward the glowing book on the altar. This book links our reality to another, a place where truth is unfiltered, raw, and absolute. But entering that world comes at a cost. Most who go there never return. Samuel kept his flashlight steady on the man, his voice calm but probing. And you? Have you been through this gate yourself? The man hesitated, then nodded slowly. I have. And I paid the price. Samuel's curiosity deepened, but he shifted his focus back to the altar. The clock mechanism beneath the book still read 12 o'clock, its frozen hands silently mocking him. The hidden mechanism. Samuel stepped closer to the altar and studied the clock more carefully. Its intricate carvings and symbols matched those he'd seen on the door at 26B. This isn't just any clock, he said, mostly to himself. It's part of the mechanism controlling the gate. The book can't be opened unless the time is set correctly, and from what I can see, it's locked at 12. The man stepped forward, his voice low. That's because 12 is the only time the gate can open. The moment when the line between worlds is at its thinnest. Samuel turned toward him. And how do you unlock it? You don't, the man replied flatly. That's the point. Opening the gate is dangerous. It's better left closed. Samuel looked to the woman, who had been listening intently. Her determination hadn't wavered. My father went through this gate, didn't he? She asked, her voice trembling. The man nodded. Yes. He crossed over in search of answers, but the gate takes more than it gives. If he's still alive, he's trapped on the other side. The father's clue. Samuel thought back to the photograph and the cryptic messages he had found so far. Her father mentioned something about a page being the key, he said, directing his words at the man. The man's expression darkened. There's a missing page from this book. That page doesn't just contain the key, it is the key. Without it, you can't unlock the gate. Samuel turned his attention back to the book, carefully lifting it from the altar. He flipped through the remaining pages, each filled with cryptic symbols and faded illustrations. When he reached the torn section, he noticed faint impressions left on the next page. Wait a second, he murmured, pulling out his magnifying glass. The faint markings revealed a sentence. When the clock strikes 12, the truth shall be revealed. Beneath the text was a symbol, an exact match to the one on the door at 26B. It's all connected, Samuel said. The book, the clock, and the door. They're part of the same mechanism. The stranger's warning. The man stepped closer, his voice calm but firm. Even if you find the key and open the gate, remember this, only one may return. The gate doesn't allow everyone to leave. The woman's face paled. Only one. But, if my father is trapped there, I can't just leave him behind. Samuel's gaze flicked between the two of them. Then we'll find another way. There has to be a way to bring him back without leaving anyone behind. The man's smirk returned, though it was faint and bitter. You're an optimist, I see. But I've been through that gate, detective. And I can tell you, no one escapes its rules. A decision. Samuel placed the book back on the altar and turned to the woman. This book holds the answers we need. But opening it is risky, and without the missing page, it might be impossible anyway. The woman's hands clenched into fists. We have to try. My father's alive, I can feel it. We can't just leave him. Samuel studied her determined face and sighed. All right. Then our next move is finding that missing page. He looked to the man. You seem to know more about this than you're letting on. Any idea where the page might be? The man chuckled softly. I don't have to guess. I know exactly where it is. But getting there will test your resolve. Samuel raised an eyebrow. And where is it? The man gestured toward the shattered stained glass windows at the back of the church. Beyond them, the faint outline of another building was visible through the fog. It's in the library beneath this church. That's where your answers, and your key, are waiting. Into the depths. Samuel glanced at the woman. Ready? She nodded, though her hands trembled slightly. Let's find him. The man gave them a knowing look as they moved toward a staircase descending into the darkness. Be careful, detective. The truth may not be what you hope it is. Samuel descended the stairs, the woman close behind. With each step, the air grew colder, the shadows deeper. As they reached the bottom, the faint flicker of candlelight illuminated rows of ancient shelves filled with books. Somewhere in this hidden library lay the key to unlocking the gate, and the answers they sought. But as Samuel stepped into the room, he couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was watching them. Chapter 4: When the Book Opens. The faint candlelight danced along the ancient stone walls of the underground library. Samuel's footsteps echoed softly as he walked among the towering bookshelves, his flashlight sweeping across the rows of dusty tomes. This is it, he muttered. The missing page has to be here somewhere. The woman, close behind him, clutched her coat tightly. Her gaze darted around the dimly lit room, equal parts awe and apprehension. It feels heavy down here, she whispered. Samuel nodded. It's not just the air. This place is steeped in something old, something unnatural. The missing page. As they moved deeper into the library, Samuel's flashlight landed on a podium at the center of the room. Upon it rested a book, glowing faintly with an otherworldly blue light. He approached it cautiously, the woman at his side. That must be it, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Samuel studied the book without touching it. Its cover was adorned with intricate symbols, some of which matched the ones from the book on the altar upstairs. However, this book's pages were intact. He flipped through them carefully, stopping when he saw a page that seemed out of place. Unlike the others, this page wasn't printed. It was handwritten, with jagged script and strange markings. At the bottom of the page was a symbol he recognized immediately, the same one etched on the door of 26B. "This is the key," Samuel said, holding the page up to the light. "It's what we've been looking for." A sudden presence. Before they could celebrate, a cold gust of air swept through the room, extinguishing the candles. The library was plunged into near darkness, save for the faint glow of the book. "What was that?" the woman asked, her voice shaking. Samuel spun around, flashlight at the ready. A shadow moved at the edge of the beam, tall, menacing, and eerily silent. From the darkness came a low, chilling voice. "You should not have come here." The stranger from the church stepped into the faint light, his face shrouded in shadows. Samuel's grip on the flashlight tightened. "You again," Samuel said. "What are you doing here?" The man smirked, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Protecting you from yourselves. If you take that page, you'll open the gate. And once it's open, there's no turning back." The father's warning. The woman stepped forward, defiant. "We're opening it. My father is trapped on the other side, and I'm going to save him." The man's expression darkened. "Your father isn't the man you remember. The gate changes people, it takes pieces of them. Even if you bring him back, he won't be whole." Samuel placed a hand on the woman's shoulder, steadying her. "We'll deal with that when the time comes. Right now, we need this page." The man sighed, his shoulders slumping. "Very well. But don't say I didn't warn you." Samuel carefully removed the page from the glowing book and slipped it into the one they had retrieved from the church. The symbols on the cover immediately began to glow, the faint light growing stronger with each passing moment. The gate opens. The library began to tremble as the book's power surged. A wind seemed to come from nowhere, whipping through the room and sending loose pages flying. Samuel placed the book on the podium at the center of the library. As its cover creaked open, a blinding light poured out, illuminating the entire room. Within the light, a swirling vortex appeared, a portal to the other side. The woman's breath caught. "Is he in there?" Samuel nodded grimly. "There's only one way to find out." Without hesitation, she stepped toward the portal. Samuel moved to follow, but the stranger blocked his path. "Only one may return," the man said, his voice firm. "If you both enter, one of you will be left behind." Samuel glared at him. "We'll see about that." Through the gate. The two of them stepped into the portal together, the light enveloping them completely. For a moment, there was nothing but silence and blinding whiteness. Then, the world shifted. They found themselves in a distorted version of reality. The sky was a swirling mass of dark clouds, and the ground beneath their feet seemed to ripple like water. All around them were shadowy figures, their forms flickering and indistinct. "Where is he?" the woman called out, her voice echoing strangely. A faint voice responded, cutting through the oppressive silence. "Catherine." Her eyes widened. "That's him." She ran toward the source of the voice, Samuel close behind. They found her father standing at the edge of a cliff, his face pale and his eyes hollow. "Catherine," he said, his voice weak. "You shouldn't be here." The truth revealed. The woman embraced her father, tears streaming down her face. "I had to find you. We're taking you back home." Her father shook his head. "I can't go back. Not completely. This place, it's taken too much from me." Samuel stepped forward. "We'll figure something out. But first, we have to leave this place before it's too late." Her father hesitated, his gaze distant. Then, he nodded. "All right." As they turned to leave, the ground beneath them began to crack. The swirling sky above grew darker, and the shadows around them pressed closer. The final choice. At the edge of the portal, the stranger's warning echoed in Samuel's mind, "Only one may return." He looked at the woman and her father, then at the portal. The light was fading, the window to escape was closing. "Go!" Samuel shouted. "Take him and leave." The woman shook her head. "No. I'm not leaving you. You don't have a choice." Samuel pushed them toward the portal. "I'll find my own way back." With no time to argue, she and her father stepped through the portal, vanishing into the light. Samuel turned to face the encroaching shadows, his jaw set. "This isn't over," he muttered, stepping into the darkness. Back in the library, the woman and her father stumbled out of the portal, landing in the library. The book slammed shut behind them, its glowing light extinguished. "Samuel," she called out, but there was no answer. The stranger appeared in the doorway, his expression unreadable. He made his choice. She turned to him, her voice trembling. "But he'll come back, won't he?" The man said nothing, his silence speaking volumes. The book sat silently on the podium, its secrets locked away once more. Somewhere, in the void beyond the gate, Samuel's fight was just beginning. Chapter 5: A World of Truth. Enveloped by the radiant light, Samuel and Catherine felt the ground beneath them disappear, as if they were floating in weightless space. Slowly, their feet touched down on a strange surface, and the blinding glow began to fade. What lay before them was surreal. Endless shelves of books stretched into the horizon, floating in mid-air like islands adrift in a vast, starry void. The air hummed with a faint vibration, and the only sound was the rustling of unseen pages. "This is the other side," Catherine whispered, her voice tinged with awe. Samuel scanned their surroundings, gripping his flashlight tightly. "It's not like anything I've ever seen. But it's definitely not reality. Echoes of the lost." As they ventured further into the strange realm, shadows began to take form around them, faint, ghostly silhouettes flickering in and out of existence. Each shadow seemed to move aimlessly, their faces blurred and expressions unreadable. "Are these the missing people?" Catherine asked, her voice trembling. Samuel stepped closer to one of the figures, but when he reached out, it dissolved into mist. "They're echoes," he said, frowning. "Fragments of people who've been trapped here for too long." A deep sadness filled Catherine's eyes. "Is my father one of them?" Before Samuel could answer, a faint voice echoed through the air. It was distant but unmistakable. "Catherine. Catherine." Her breath caught, and she turned toward the sound. "That's him. That's my father." Without waiting, she took off running, leaving Samuel no choice but to follow. The light of a forgotten book. The voice led them to a towering shelf that glowed faintly with an ethereal light. At its center was a single book, shimmering in hues of blue. Samuel and Catherine stopped in front of it, their eyes fixed on the object. "This must be it," Catherine said, reaching for the book. "Wait." Samuel grabbed her arm before she could touch it. It could be a trap. He stepped forward cautiously, inspecting the book from every angle. The light seemed to pulse gently, as if it were alive. With a deep breath, Samuel carefully removed the book from the shelf and opened it. Inside, the pages were blank, except for one. On this page, an image began to form, like ink bleeding onto parchment. It showed Catherine's father standing amidst the void, surrounded by swirling shadows. "It's him," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. A message appeared beneath the image. "The price of truth is identity." Samuel frowned, reading the words aloud. "What does that mean?" A father's voice. Before they could decipher the meaning, the shadows around them began to coalesce, growing darker and more defined. From the void, a figure emerged. It was Catherine's father. "Father!" Catherine cried, rushing toward him. But Samuel stepped in her path, holding her back. "Something's not right," he said, his voice low. Her father's form flickered unnaturally, his eyes hollow and distant. "Catherine, why did you come here?" he asked, his voice echoing unnaturally. "To bring you home," she said desperately. "We can leave together." Her father shook his head slowly. "This place, it takes pieces of you. I'm no longer whole. If you bring me back, I won't be the same." The key to escape. Samuel studied the glowing book in his hands. "There has to be a way to reverse this," he muttered. He flipped through the pages until he found another inscription. "The light binds the gate. The key must close it." He turned to Catherine. "This book is the key to sealing the gate. But if we use it, there's no guarantee we can bring your father back." Tears streamed down Catherine's face as she looked at her father. "I can't leave him here. There has to be another way." Her father stepped forward, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You don't belong here, Catherine. You need to go back." "No," she cried. "Not without you. The final choice." The shadows began to swirl violently, closing in on them. The ground trembled, and the light from the book grew brighter, almost blinding. "We're running out of time," Samuel shouted. "Catherine, make a choice, now." Her father smiled faintly, his expression filled with sorrow. "It's all right, my dear. You've already saved me by coming here. But I can't leave." "No." Catherine sobbed, but Samuel grabbed her arm. "Go, Catherine. If we stay any longer, none of us will make it back." With great reluctance, she nodded. Samuel opened the book, and its light engulfed them. The swirling shadows screamed in protest, but the portal began to pull them back toward the real world. Back in the bookstore. The next thing Catherine knew, she was back in the forgotten page. Her father was beside her, weak but alive. The glowing book lay on the desk, its light fading as it slowly shut itself. "Samuel," she called out, looking around frantically. But he was nowhere to be seen. The store fell silent, the air heavy with unresolved tension. Her father placed a hand on her shoulder, his expression pained. "He stayed behind," he said softly. "He made the sacrifice." Catherine clutched the book, her tears falling freely. "But he'll find his way back, won't he?" Her father didn't answer. Instead, he gazed at the now closed book, its secrets locked away once more. A new beginning. Though Catherine and her father had returned, Samuel remained on the other side, his fate uncertain. The glowing book, now dormant, seemed to hum faintly, as if waiting for its next chapter to be written. Far away, in the void beyond the gate, Samuel stood alone. He looked out over the endless shelves and swirling shadows, his jaw set with determination. "This isn't the end," he said to himself. "I'll find my way back." And somewhere in the bookstore, the faintest flicker of light pulsed from the sealed book, hinting that Samuel's journey was far from over. Chapter 6: The Lost Key. By the time dawn broke over the foggy streets, Samuel and Catherine had returned to the forgotten page. The strange book they retrieved from the church now rested on Samuel's desk, its secrets weighing heavily on their minds. The book was closed, but this was far from the end. If anything, their questions had only multiplied. What was the true nature of the book? Why did it demand a price for revealing the truth? And most importantly, was Catherine's father truly safe? Samuel's thoughts were interrupted by Catherine's voice. "My father said the book must be sealed to close the gate forever," she said. "But if we seal it, will we ever learn the truth?" Samuel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he carefully inspected the book. Its surface seemed normal at first glance, but on closer inspection, he noticed a small groove on one edge. "This is a keyhole," he murmured. Catherine leaned closer. "Do you think this is what my father meant by 'the page is the key'?" "It's possible," Samuel replied. "But this isn't a metaphor. We need an actual, physical key to seal this." A sudden arrival. As Samuel examined the book, the store's bell jingled. Heavy footsteps echoed across the wooden floor. Samuel looked up to see the familiar figure of the black-coated man standing in the doorway. "You again," Samuel said, narrowing his eyes. "Why are you here this time?" The man's gaze landed on the book. "That book must be sealed. If you don't, it'll draw others to it, people who will pay any price to open it." "And what's your role in all of this?" Samuel asked sharply. The man smirked faintly. "Let's just say I've been where you are now. I've walked through the gate, and I've seen what's on the other side." "Then you must know how to seal it," Catherine interjected. "Do you know where the key is?" The man hesitated, then gave a small nod. "The key exists. It's in the possession of someone who, like me, crossed through the gate and returned, but not without scars. Her name is Elizabeth Carter." "Seeking Elizabeth Carter." Samuel frowned. "Elizabeth Carter. I've heard that name before." Catherine's eyes widened. "I remember hearing rumors about her. She disappeared for months, then came back, but no one ever saw her again. She's been in hiding ever since." The man nodded. "She lives on the outskirts of town, in an abandoned house. She has the key, but convincing her to part with it won't be easy. The key is her only link to this world." Samuel grabbed his coat and turned to Catherine. "If the key is what we need to seal this book, then we have to find her. Are you coming?" Catherine hesitated but eventually nodded. "Let's go." The abandoned house. The house was crumbling, overgrown with vines, and shrouded in an eerie silence. As Samuel and Catherine approached, the door creaked open as if inviting them in. Inside, the air was cold, and the faint smell of mildew lingered. In the center of the room sat an elderly woman. Her gray hair framed a face lined with weariness, but her sharp eyes betrayed a keen awareness. She looked up at them as they entered. "So, you've come for the key," Elizabeth said without preamble. Samuel paused, surprised. "You know why we're here?" Elizabeth nodded. "People only seek me out for one reason. They want to close the gate, or open it." "We want to close it," Catherine said quickly. "My father was trapped on the other side, but we brought him back. Now we want to make sure no one else suffers." Elizabeth studied her for a moment before speaking. "The key can seal the gate, yes. But once it's sealed, no one will ever be able to open it again. That includes your father's memories, his connection to what's been taken. Are you sure you're willing to make that choice?" The key story. Elizabeth opened a drawer and pulled out a small, ornate key. Its surface was engraved with intricate patterns that seemed to shimmer faintly in the dim light. "This is the key," she said. "I brought it back when I crossed the gate. But to do so, I had to give up something in return, my past. My memories of who I was before the gate, they're gone. All I know is that I can never part with this key without losing myself entirely." Samuel took a deep breath. "If we seal the book, will the gate be completely closed? Elizabeth nodded. Yes. But the book's secrets, the truth it holds, will also be locked away forever. Catherine looked at her father, who had been quietly listening. What do you think, Dad? He sighed heavily. I've already paid my price. If sealing the gate means protecting you and others from the same fate, then it's worth it. The final choice. Elizabeth handed the key to Samuel, her hands trembling. Use it wisely. Once you turn it, there's no going back. Back at the bookstore, Samuel placed the book on the desk. Catherine and her father watched silently as he inserted the key into the groove. For a moment, he hesitated, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. If we seal this, we lose any chance of learning more, Samuel said. But if we don't, we risk letting others fall into the same trap. Catherine nodded. Seal it. We've already lost enough. Samuel turned the key. The book emitted a soft hum, then a brilliant light engulfed it. When the glow faded, the book was no longer glowing or humming. It was ordinary, inert, a closed door. A new dawn. As the sun rose, the air in the forgotten page felt lighter, as though an invisible weight had lifted. Catherine turned to Samuel. Do you think this is truly over? Samuel leaned back in his chair, studying the now sealed book. For now, yes. But I wouldn't be surprised if this isn't the last we hear of the gate. Catherine's father placed a hand on her shoulder. No matter what happens, we have each other. That's enough. As they left the bookstore, Samuel remained behind, staring at the sealed book. Somewhere deep in his gut, he knew the mystery wasn't entirely resolved. But for now, the gate was closed, and that was enough. Chapter 7: The Final Door. The bookstore was eerily quiet that night. Samuel sat at his desk, the sealed book before him. Though the key had locked it away, he couldn't shake the feeling that something still lingered within its pages, a whisper of secrets yet untold. Catherine and her father had gone home, believing their ordeal was over. But for Samuel, the case wasn't closed. The man in the black coat's warnings echoed in his mind. The truth always demands a price. Samuel leaned forward, his hands tracing the now ordinary cover of the book. This isn't the end, he murmured. It can't be. A whisper in the dark. As midnight struck, the air in the bookstore shifted. A faint rustling sound filled the room, like the turning of pages. Samuel straightened, his eyes darting toward the book. Its cover glimmered faintly, the key still embedded in its side. For a moment, it looked as though the symbols etched into the metal were moving, rearranging themselves. Samuel grabbed his flashlight and leaned closer. What now? He muttered. A new inscription appeared on the book's cover, glowing faintly. The gate is sealed, but the story is not. A mysterious visitor. Before Samuel could react, the store's bell chimed. He turned toward the door, his hand instinctively reaching for the small knife in his pocket. Standing in the doorway was a figure shrouded in a dark cloak, their face obscured. The air grew colder as they stepped inside, their presence heavy and foreboding. "Detective Samuel Blake," the figure said, their voice low and resonant. "You've done well to close the gate, but you've only delayed the inevitable." Samuel narrowed his eyes. "Who are you? And what do you mean delayed?" The figure stepped closer, their shadow stretching unnaturally across the floor. "The gate is just one of many. You've closed a door, but the cracks remain. Others will find them, just as you did." The truth unveiled. Samuel frowned. "And what's your stake in this? Why are you here?" The figure tilted their head slightly. "To warn you. The book is not merely a key or a gate, it is a map. It shows the paths between worlds, and those paths are always shifting. If you wish to stop what's coming, you must find the source." "The source?" Samuel repeated. The figure pointed to the sealed book. "The one who created it. Only they can stop the spreading of the gates." Samuel hesitated, his mind racing. "And where do I find this creator?" The figure gave a faint, humorless laugh. "You already know where to start. The book holds more than you've seen. But unlocking its next secret will require more than a key." Before Samuel could ask more, the figure dissolved into shadows, leaving behind a chill that lingered in the air. A choice to make. Alone once more, Samuel stared at the book. It sat silently on the desk, betraying no sign of the mysterious figure's claims. Yet, deep down, Samuel knew they were telling the truth. He pulled the key from the book's side and studied it closely. The intricate engravings seemed to shift under his gaze, forming patterns he hadn't noticed before. One symbol stood out, a mark he'd seen before, etched into the door of 26B and the altar in the church. "Whatever this is," Samuel said quietly, "it's not over. A new journey." As dawn approached, Samuel made his decision. He packed his flashlight, notebook, and a few essential tools. The book, now sealed once more, went into his bag. He locked up the bookstore, stepping out into the foggy morning streets. His destination wasn't clear, but he knew it would start where all mysteries began, with the first gate and the clues it left behind. "This is just the beginning," Samuel said to himself as he walked into the mist. The story wasn't over. In fact, it had only just begun.